I was enjoying my morning coffee, letting the peaceful silence of my land settle around me, when I noticed something that nearly made me choke on my drink. A long line of SUVs, campers, and sedans snaked down my private dirt road, their tires kicking up dust as they rumbled closer. At first, I thought maybe I had dozed off and was dreaming. But no, the chaos was real. People were stepping out, stretching their arms, yawning like they had just arrived at a vacation resort. A few of them started unloading tents, others carried coolers, and some were already scouting out spots to set up camp. I stood there, mug still in hand, utterly dumbfounded. What the hell was happening? Then I spotted her. Karen. The queen of the HOA. Clipboard in hand, her blonde bob swaying as she marched forward like some kind of self-appointed general leading her army. She wore that smug expression I had come to despise, the one that screamed, "I'm in charge here." I took a deep breath, setting my coffee down before I ended up throwing it. Stepping off my porch, I walked toward the growing crowd. People were hammering stakes into the ground, setting up folding chairs, even rolling out sleeping bags like they were in a national park. "Morning, neighbor." Karen beamed at me as if we were best friends. "We appreciate your generous donation to the HOA's annual camping retreat." I blinked. "My what?" Karen laughed, waving a hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be silly. I told the HOA we needed a community getaway, and your land is just perfect for it. Plenty of space, away from the city, and it's not like you're using it for anything important." I clenched my jaw. "Karen, this is my land. Private property. None of these people have permission to be here." She gave me that patronizing smile that made my blood pressure spike. "Well, technically, the HOA agreed that we should have a shared outdoor experience. And since you're part of the neighborhood—" "I am not part of the HOA," I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to cut steel. Her smile faltered for half a second before she plastered it back on. "Well, you should be. And the rest of us have already made arrangements. It's just one weekend, and honestly, you should be grateful to be included." Grateful? Was she serious? I scanned the scene. Someone had already started a fire pit, kids were running around, and a guy in cargo shorts was trying to string up a hammock between two of my trees. "This is trespassing," I said, barely keeping my temper in check. "You need to tell everyone to leave. Now." Karen scoffed. "Oh, come on, don't be dramatic. We're all neighbors. It's just camping. Just camping. On my land. With 100 uninvited guests." Before I could respond, I heard a loud splat followed by a shriek. A teenage girl had accidentally stepped into a pile of cow manure. "EW. Gross. There's poop everywhere," she screamed, hopping on one foot. Her mom gasped. "Wait, you mean this isn't a cleaned-up campsite?" Karen hesitated. "Well, technically, no, but—" "You mean there are no bathrooms?" someone else called out, horrified. A man in a Hawaiian shirt sniffed the air. "And what's that smell?" I fought the urge to laugh. This land wasn't some polished campground, it was raw, untouched property, filled with all the glorious hazards of nature. Karen, however, was still determined to dig herself deeper. She turned back to me, her hands on her hips. "Look, we already planned this. People have taken time off work, some even brought RVs. It's too late to cancel." "Not my problem," I said flatly. She glared at me like I was ruining her day. "Well, technically, since the HOA agreed." "For the last time, Karen," I snapped, "the HOA has zero control over my land. You, and every single person here, are trespassing." A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. Some of the campers were starting to shift uncomfortably, realizing they might not actually have the legal right to be here. Karen, however, was still standing her ground, lips pursed in frustration. "Well," she huffed, "if you're going to be so selfish about it, maybe we should put it to a vote." I stared at her, utterly incredulous. "A vote? You think you can vote to take over my land?" She lifted her chin. "Well, we live in a democracy, don't we?" I ran a hand down my face, inhaling deeply. "All right, Karen. If you want to act like this is some kind of democracy, let me introduce you to my security detail. I reached for my phone and made a quick call. It's time, I said simply before hanging up. Karen's eyebrows furrowed. Time for what? A deep, rumbling growl interrupted her. From behind the main barn, they appeared. My real protectors. 6 massive dogs, each one trained, disciplined, and built like a tank, rounded the corner. Their sleek black coats gleamed under the sun, their sharp eyes locking onto the trespassers with an intensity that sent shivers down spines. People froze. Someone dropped a bag of marshmallows. Are those friendly? A woman whispered, stepping behind her husband. I smirked. Depends. The largest of the pack, a beast of a Belgian Malinois named Titan, let out a deep bark that rattled through the air. Karen's face lost all color. You can't just bring attack dogs into this. I folded my arms. Oh, but you can bring 100 strangers onto my land? Titan took a slow, calculated step forward. Another dog, Shadow, followed suit, her ears pricked forward, eyes locked on Karen like she was prey. Karen swallowed hard. You wouldn't. I shrugged. They're trained not to attack. Unless someone provokes them, I added, watching Karen's eyes widen as realization dawned. And just like that, the so-called community camping retreat turned into sheer chaos. People started scrambling, shoving their belongings into bags, tripping over each other in their rush to leave. The man in cargo shorts abandoned his hammock completely. A family of 4 practically sprinted to their minivan. Karen, now perched on the hood of an SUV, shrieked, "I'm calling the police." I chuckled, pulling out my own phone. Go ahead. I already did. And just as I said that, a pair of squad cars pulled up. Karen gawked at me in sheer disbelief as the officers stepped out. That's when she realized she had lost. Karen's face was a mixture of fury and panic as the police officers stepped out of their vehicles. The campers, who had moments ago been setting up their dream weekend retreat, were now frozen in place, their laughter and chatter replaced by uneasy silence. I watched as Karen tried to compose herself, her fingers gripping the clipboard so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and marched toward the officers like she was about to file a formal complaint at a customer service desk. "Thank goodness you're here, officers!" she exclaimed, flipping through the pages on her clipboard. "This man has released dangerous animals on innocent families. We were just trying to enjoy a peaceful community event, and he's threatening us." She pointed a manicured finger at me, her voice trembling with fake distress. "This is criminal behavior. He needs to be arrested immediately." One of the officers, a tall guy with a mustache that looked like it had seen more action than most war veterans, gave her a long, unimpressed look. He then turned to me. "Sir, you called about trespassers?" I nodded. "Yes. This is my land. I never gave anyone permission to be here, and now I've got 100 people treating my property like a public park. And as for the dogs," I added, glancing at Karen, "they're just making sure no one tries anything stupid." The other officer, a woman with sharp eyes and a clipboard of her own, looked at Karen. "Ma'am, do you have written permission to be here?" Karen blinked, thrown off by the question. "Well, I mean the HOA agreed that this space would be perfect for our retreat. It's just for the weekend." The officer's expression didn't change. "That's not what I asked. Do you have written permission from the owner?" Karen's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish. She looked around, clearly hoping someone would back her up, but most of the campers were now focused on packing up their stuff, too nervous to get involved. The officer sighed and turned to me. "Do you have proof this is your property?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked over to my truck, reached into the glove compartment, and pulled out a neatly organized folder. I handed it to the officer, who flipped through it with practiced efficiency. "Land deed registered in your name," she muttered. "No HOA involvement, no shared community spaces." She snapped it shut and looked at Karen. "Ma'am, you and everyone else here are trespassing." Karen sputtered. That can't be right. He's part of the neighborhood. That means the HOA has jurisdiction. The officer raised an eyebrow. That's not how property laws work. The HOA only governs members who have agreed to their rules. This man is not a member, and this land is not HOA property. You have no authority here. Karen's face twisted into something resembling a furious cartoon villain. But we planned this for months, she wailed, stomping her foot like a child throwing a tantrum. People took time off work. We printed schedules and everything. The officer's patience was visibly thinning. Ma'am, that's not his problem. You can't just take over someone's land because it's convenient for you. Before Karen could argue further, a loud, guttural growl cut through the tension. Titan had stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the ground. His ears were perked, his dark eyes locked on Karen with an expression that almost seemed to say, "I dare you to keep talking." Karen let out a strangled noise and scrambled back, nearly tripping over her own feet. "Why you need to get rid of those beasts," she screeched. I smirked. "They're on my land. Unlike you, they have permission to be here." The officer seemed to fight back a chuckle but quickly regained his serious demeanor. "All right, folks," he announced, addressing the crowd. "You've got 10 minutes to pack up and clear out. If you're still here after that, we'll start issuing citations for trespassing." A ripple of panic spread through the campers. People started grabbing their belongings in a frenzy, stuffing tents into bags, dragging coolers back to their vehicles. A few grumbled about how they didn't even get to roast marshmallows, but no one dared argue with the police. Karen, however, wasn't ready to give up. She rounded on me, her face red with frustration. "This isn't over. You're ruining a community event. You're making yourself the enemy of your own neighborhood." I shrugged. "I don't care about the neighborhood, Karen. I care about my land. And next time, if you or anyone else tries this again, my dogs won't just be standing around." Her face paled. You wouldn't dare." I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough so that only she could hear. "Try me." She opened her mouth, then closed it, her jaw clenching as she realized she had lost. With one final glare, she stomped off toward her car, slamming the door so hard that the whole vehicle shook. I watched as the last few stragglers loaded up their stuff, throwing cautious glances at the dogs still standing in formation. Titan let out one final bark, as if giving them a countdown. That was enough to send the remaining campers scrambling. The officers waited until the last vehicle had driven off before turning back to me. The mustached one tipped his hat. "Looks like you handled that pretty well." I gave him a half-smile. "Thanks for backing me up." The female officer glanced at the dogs, then back at me. "Gotta say, that's an effective security system." I chuckled. "They're better than any alarm." She nodded. "Well, let us know if they try this again. Something tells me that woman isn't gonna let it go." I sighed, already expecting another Karen-sized headache in the future. "I'll be ready." The officers got back into their vehicles and drove off, leaving me alone with my land once again. I took a deep breath, finally letting my shoulders relax. The quiet had returned, and with it, a deep sense of satisfaction. I turned to my dogs, who were now sitting attentively, their eyes still scanning the area. "Good job, guys." Titan wagged his tail, and Shadow gave me a quick nuzzle before trotting off to patrol the property again. I picked up my coffee, now cold, but I didn't care. I had one. My land was mine again. And Karen? Well, she had just learned a very important lesson about messing with the wrong neighbor. As I watched the last of the campers drive away, leaving behind nothing but a few trampled patches of grass and some forgotten pieces of trash, I took a deep breath. The silence was finally back. My land, my sanctuary, was mine again. Titan and the rest of the pack slowly relaxed, their ears no longer perked up in alert. Shadow gave a low, satisfied huff before flopping down on the porch, stretching her legs out lazily. It was over. At least, that's what I thought. Just as I turned to head inside, I heard the unmistakable screech of tires on gravel. My jaw clenched. I didn't even have to look to know who it was. Karen's SUV came to an aggressive halt at the edge of my driveway, and she practically threw the door open as she stepped out, seething. Her hands were shaking, not with fear, but with rage. The moment our eyes met, she jabbed a finger in my direction. "This isn't over," she snapped, marching toward me as if she could intimidate me into giving in. "You think you can just embarrass me like that? You think you can just throw me off of my community's land?" I didn't move. I simply stared at her, my face unreadable. She was waiting for a reaction, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. "This isn't your community's land, Karen," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This is my property. You and your little HOA fantasy have no authority here." Her lip curled in frustration. "You don't belong here. You live among us, but you refuse to contribute. You refuse to follow the rules that keep this neighborhood together." I let out a dry chuckle. "Your rules? The ones I never agreed to? You don't get to decide what I do with my land, Karen." She stomped her foot like a child. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. They think I have no power now. Do you realize what you've done?" I smirked. "Yeah." I reminded them that you're not as important as you think you are. Her face turned a deep shade of red. For a second, I thought she was about to scream again, but instead, she took a deep breath and composed herself. That was never a good sign. It meant she was scheming. "I hope you're prepared for the consequences," she said in a sickly sweet tone, her eyes glinting with something that almost looked like satisfaction. "Because I have friends who are very well connected. You may have gotten the police on your side this time, but let's see what happens when the county gets involved. You will regret this." I crossed my arms. "I doubt it." With one final glare, she turned on her heel, stormed back to her SUV, and slammed the door so hard it echoed through the quiet air. She backed up so fast that her tires kicked up dust, then sped off down the road, leaving a trail of gravel behind. I watched her go, shaking my head. If she wanted to play dirty, I was more than ready. Over the next few days, I kept a close eye on my property. I had security cameras installed all over the place, motion sensors near the fence line, and of course my dogs. I wasn't about to let Karen pull any surprises. Sure enough, it didn't take long before I found out what she was up to. A letter arrived in my mailbox, stamped with the official county seal. I opened it, scanning the words carefully. A complaint had been filed against me, alleging that my land was being used in a way that violated community standards. There was talk of environmental concerns and public safety hazards. In short, Karen had actually gone through with her ridiculous threat. I let out a laugh. Did she really think this was going to scare me? I made a few calls, got my paperwork in order, and set up a meeting at the county office. When I arrived, dressed in my usual jeans and a worn-out flannel, I could see Karen sitting in the waiting area, dressed like she was about to meet with the president. She smirked when she saw me, as if she had already won. I took a seat, stretching my legs out, completely relaxed. If she thought she had me cornered, she was about to be very disappointed. A clerk called us in, and we were led into a small office where a middle-aged county official sat behind a cluttered desk. He adjusted his glasses and glanced at the complaint. "All right," he said, looking between the two of us. "We have a report here claiming that your land has been improperly used as an unsanctioned event space, that you have hazardous materials on site, and that your animals pose a public safety threat. Is that correct?" Karen immediately sat up straighter. "Yes. He has attacked dogs that nearly mauled innocent families, and his land is completely unsafe for the community." The official turned to me. "Sir, do you have anything to say in response?" I pulled out my own folder and placed it on the desk. "I have evidence that Karen and 100 other people trespassed on my property without permission. I also have security footage showing that my dogs never harmed anyone. They were controlled, trained, and simply doing their job of protecting my land." The official frowned as he flipped through the documents. Karen's confident smirk was slowly fading. I also have the police report from the officers who responded that day, I continued. It confirms that Karen organized an illegal gathering on my property and that she had no legal right to be there. Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The official sighed, rubbing his temples. Ma'am, you do realize that this complaint holds no legal weight, right? This land is privately owned, and the HOA has no jurisdiction over it. There is no violation here. Karen's face twisted with fury. But she turned to me, her eyes burning with resentment. You can't just get away with this. I smiled. Looks like I can. The official gave her a pointed look. Ma'am, I strongly suggest you refrain from filing any further baseless complaints. Otherwise, you might be the one facing legal action. Karen's entire body went stiff. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. She looked at me, pure hatred in her eyes, but she knew she had lost. Again. Without another word, she stood up and stormed out of the office. I watched her go, shaking my head. Some people just don't know when to quit. As I stepped out into the fresh air, I took a deep breath. It was over. This time, for real. Karen had tried everything, manipulation, lies, even legal threats, and she had failed at every turn. That night, as I sat on my porch, watching the sunset, Titan rested his head on my lap, his tail thumping lazily against the wooden floor. Shadow and the rest of the pack were sprawled out around me, completely at peace. I sipped my drink, enjoying the quiet, knowing that no matter what Karen tried next, she would always be met with the same reality. This land was mine, and no amount of HOA nonsense was ever going to change that.